Ethan Wallace, the renowned CEO of BrightWave Technologies, had reached the pinnacle of power and success in the tech industry. But despite his company's achievements, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that a shadow loomed over the internal culture, something the numbers and reports couldn't reveal. To uncover the truth, Ethan made an unprecedented decision. He disguised himself as an anonymous janitor and quietly stepped into the world of the silent people at his own company. What began as simple observation quickly turned into a journey that exposed disturbing secrets of unfair treatment and invisible discrimination, challenging everything Ethan believed in. How could a simple act of disguise lead to such dramatic changes? And how did this experience bring to light startling truths and spark a radical revolution in BrightWave's culture? Follow along to discover the answers. And before we begin, share with us where you're watching from. And if this story of honesty and redemption touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Ethan Wallace stood before the large window of his corner office, overlooking the bustling downtown below. At 48, he had reached the pinnacle that many people dream of, CEO of BrightWave Technologies, one of the world's pioneering and most influential technology companies. From an ambitious young man who started his business in his family's small garage, Ethan had risen to become a leadership icon, taking BrightWave from scratch to the top of the tech industry. As he adjusted his tie, Ethan couldn't help but feel proud. The company had just finished a quarter of record revenue, and BrightWave's innovative products were leading the way and changing the way people connect and communicate. But despite those achievements, a feeling of unease had lingered in Ethan's mind for months. Behind the successful numbers and the glamour of this office, Ethan began to wonder if he truly understood the lives of the people who worked for him. Reports of declining employee satisfaction couldn't be ignored, and Ethan felt that fleeting meetings and dry business metrics couldn't reveal everything. A worry arose in his heart. Was there something he had missed, something subtle but important being overlooked in the glow of success? The reports, the weekly summaries, even the most seemingly transparent business metrics couldn't help him understand what was really going on at the employee level. This concern turned into an obsession, keeping Ethan awake at night, thinking about the core values he had always cherished. His company was built to be a symbol of human connection and development, yet now, was BrightWave truly a place where employees felt safe and respected? Ethan's decision gradually took shape, like a smoldering fire waiting to erupt. He would disguise himself as a janitor, the lowest and most anonymous role, to immerse himself in the world of the quietest people at BrightWave. He wanted to witness firsthand, to listen to the thoughts, concerns, and even frustrations of the workers here, those who had no voice in the luxurious meetings. However, Ethan knew this was not an easy step. It wasn't just about giving up the comfort and image of power he was accustomed to, but also about facing his own psychological limitations. Could a CEO like him truly blend in without being detected? Would employees notice his absence from important meetings, and what would his close associates think when they saw the head of the company disappear without explanation? When Ethan revealed his intention to a few key leaders, he immediately met with opposition. Jessica, the HR director, appeared surprised and even uneasy. She also worried that, with his age and position, Ethan could be at risk of health problems from engaging in heavy cleaning work. Mark, the COO, even bluntly expressed that Ethan was overreacting, and that a CEO like him shouldn't put himself in that position. Some other managers also expressed that, instead of wasting time on this unnecessary matter, Ethan should focus on strategic projects. However, Ethan remained determined. He understood that disguising himself wasn't simply about investigating, but also a journey to regain faith in the values he had built. For him, there was no way to deeply understand the company culture than to become a part of the employees' lives himself. No glamour, no power, only sincerity and a desire to listen. He knew this experience would help him rebuild trust, not only from employees but also from himself, that BrightWave could still be the company he once dreamed of. Sometimes, to truly lead, the leader needs to be willing to see the world through the eyes of the smallest people. And Ethan believed this would be the first step for him to create real and lasting change. Ethan's first morning under the new name Eli began in a stifling silence, a far cry from the comfort of his corner office. The common office floor where he was assigned to clean was a vast space with neat rows of desks, shiny tiled floors, and cold fluorescent lights. Everything appeared clear, but the atmosphere seemed to carry an invisible weight, a hurried and busy energy devoid of warmth, where people move like indifferent shadows. In the simple janitor uniform, Ethan was now fully transformed into Eli, the new guy, the invisible one amidst a space filled with crisp shirts and tailored suits. The feeling of strangeness and awkwardness lingered, like a simmering anxiety from within as he gripped the cleaning rag, preparing to embark on his new job. He was no longer the powerful CEO greeted by everyone, but just a cleaning staff member no one paid attention to. Eli was quickly introduced to Martha, an elderly woman who had worked there for a long time. Martha was a person with a kind smile, salt and pepper hair, and a dedicated work ethic. She greeted Eli with a friendly smile, but her eyes held a hint of caution, as if she was too accustomed to keeping her distance from the people who worked on this office floor. As the two of them mopped the floor together, Martha carefully shared, "Don't mind if someone acts cold or contemptuous. Many office workers here don't even look at us. To them, we're just passing shadows." Eli nodded, his mind awhirl with thoughts. As a CEO, he had never felt the need to hide or be looked down upon. But now, in this new role, he gradually realized that feeling, a feeling of being lost in the luxurious space that he used to find so familiar. While continuing his work, Eli overheard a loud conversation from the middle management group in the marketing department. Greg, the head of the department, was speaking in a joking but mocking tone. "Tom is out of fashion now. We need someone more dynamic and trendy. He's just slowing us down." Eli looked through the glass partition and saw Tom, a longtime employee with gray hair, pensive but warm eyes, sitting quietly at his desk, his face clearly showing quiet acceptance. Perhaps Tom had heard these criticisms too many times. Witnessing that scene, Ethan, now Eli, felt a deep sadness. Tom had devoted his entire career to this company, contributing his efforts and enthusiasm for decades, yet now he was seen as an obstacle, someone out of fashion. He clearly felt the invisible injustice lingering in the air, a silent but bitter disrespect that perhaps longtime employees like Tom had to endure every day. Suddenly, the image of the glamorous CEO in Ethan's eyes became distant, replaced by questions that swirled in his heart. Was the company he built, the place he was always proud of, truly fair to the silent contributors like Tom? After his first day in his new role, Ethan returned home feeling heavy-hearted. Placing his simple bag and janitor uniform on the chair, he walked into the kitchen, where the soft light from the pendant lamp made the space feel warmer. Claire, his wife, was preparing dinner and immediately noticed her husband's preoccupied expression. She smiled gently, pulled him to the dining table, and placed her hand on his. "How was your first day?" Claire asked, her voice full of concern and affection. Ethan sighed softly, his tired eyes gazing into the distance. "Honey, I didn't expect what I saw and heard to be so heavy," he began. "I saw senior employees like Tom, who dedicated their lives to the company, being overlooked, ignored as if they no longer had value. And there are people like Martha, always working in oblivion, as if there were shadows in everyone's eyes." Ethan paused, as if trying to find the words to express the turmoil of emotions within him. "I never thought I would have to face such heartbreaking stories in the very company I built." Claire squeezed her husband's hand, her gentle eyes radiating understanding. "I know this certainly isn't easy for you. You always believe in fairness and respect. And now having to witness those values being overshadowed, it must be heartbreaking." Ethan nodded slightly, a wave of emotion surging within him. "I'm not sure I can continue, Claire. It feels like I'm facing a completely unfamiliar BrightWave." Claire gripped Ethan's hand tighter, her voice full of encouragement and support. "Ethan, it's precisely because you feel heartbroken that you have to continue. You started this journey because you wanted to understand every aspect of the company, to bring about real change. If what you see makes you feel bad, then maybe that's a sign you're on the right track." She paused, looking deep into his eyes, then smiled. "You're not one to shy away from challenges, Ethan. If anyone can change BrightWave, it's you." Claire's sincere encouragement was like a small flame rekindled in Ethan's heart. He felt the warmth spreading from his wife's hand, infusing his heart with renewed faith. Yes, he couldn't give up now. What he had seen and heard, however painful, were things he had to face if he wanted to restore BrightWave's true values. Ethan looked up, his eyes brighter, filled with determination. "You're right, Claire. I have to keep going. If this is the only way to see the truth, then I'll see it through." Claire smiled with satisfaction, gently kissing his forehead. I'll always be here to support you, Ethan. Remember, you're not alone. That evening, in the peaceful atmosphere of their home, Ethan clearly felt that he had regained the faith and motivation he needed, and with Claire's support, he knew he would have the strength to continue this journey of discovery and change. Tomorrow he would return to BrightWave, continue his role as Eli, and go further in understanding the hidden corners that he had inadvertently overlooked. The next morning, Ethan as Eli arrived on the engineering floor with a heavy heart but also full of determination. The engineering floor of BrightWave was a different space with a serious and highly focused atmosphere. The constant sound of typing echoed, the blue light from the monitors reflecting on pensive faces. The walls were covered with complex diagrams and code along with untapped new ideas. This was where creativity and logic intertwined, but Ethan realized there was something stifling lurking in the air. As he pushed his small cleaning cart through the rows of desks, Eli happened to meet Lily, a petite girl with neatly tied hair and bright but timid eyes. She focused intently on the screen, her fingers typing quickly lines of code, but occasionally looked around with an anxious look, as if she was always afraid someone might judge her. Eli struck up a conversation with Lily while cleaning the floor near her desk. At first, Lily seemed surprised that someone noticed her in this space, but then she opened up a little when talking to Eli, although still hesitant. Lily recounted, her voice soft as a whisper, "I've come up with quite a few new ideas for the recent project, but they've all been rejected or ignored. I know I'm not good at speaking in front of crowds, but I think those ideas have value." She paused, then added with a wry smile, "Derek, my director, always says that I don't have leadership qualities. He says I'm too timid, not confident enough to lead anything." Eli listened, clearly sensing the disappointment and deep sadness in Lily's words. He understood that feeling, the feeling of being judged not based on true ability, but simply for not fitting a certain mold. Lily, with her talent and passion, should have been encouraged to develop, not pushed into a dark corner just because she wasn't the outgoing or bold type. Just then, as Eli bent down to clean near Lily's desk, he overheard a conversation from the corner of the room. Derek, the IT director, was talking to a colleague about his staff. His voice rang out, clear and with no attempt to hide his disdain. "Lily is good at technical stuff, but she doesn't have the vision. We need people with influence, people who can speak up in meetings, lead the whole team forward. She just knows how to bury her head in the screen. Not the type of person who will make a difference." Eli stood frozen, feeling a surge of anger rising within him. Derek's words were like daggers piercing Ethan's belief that everyone in the company was judged fairly. He recognized the blatant injustice when talents like Lily were pushed aside simply because they didn't fit the ideal mold set by management. The judgment based on appearance and superficial confidence had obscured the true values within. Watching Lily lower her head, continuing to work after hearing the contemptuous words that were probably all too familiar, Ethan realized that this was not just an individual problem, but a systemic one. He saw clearly that the diversity of talent and working styles had been sacrificed for empty standards. That wasn't how he wanted BrightWave to operate. As Eli, he could only silently continue his work, but in Ethan's mind a new determination formed. He knew that after this undercover journey ended, he would have to confront people like Derek with this whole biased evaluation system, and he would have to find a way to change it so that people like Lily no longer felt invisible in the company where they deserved to shine. The next day at work as Eli, Ethan entered the engineering floor, not expecting that this place would lead him to a touching discovery. In his simple uniform, he pushed the cleaning cart down the hallway, observing the young employees and experienced engineers engrossed in their work. The workspace here was usually quiet, focused, but occasionally echoed with the light laughter of interns exchanging ideas and answering questions with an enthusiastic tone. That's when he noticed Rachel, a senior engineer with a serious appearance but friendly and warm gestures. Rachel was not only proficient in her expertise but also always dedicated to helping interns who were still struggling. Ethan noticed how she patiently listened, her eyes gentle and always encouraging them even with small steps forward. When an intern had difficulty with a complex project, Rachel did not hesitate to sit down beside them, calmly explaining each step and encouraging them to keep trying. Rachel exuded a dedication and compassion that Ethan rarely saw in other ambitious colleagues. However, during lunch break, as Ethan was cleaning near the meeting room, he overheard Sarah, the head of development, criticizing Rachel in an unforgiving tone. Sarah expressed her dissatisfaction with Rachel wasting too much time supporting interns instead of focusing entirely on the team's project. Doesn't she know how to prioritize? Sarah said, her voice cold. We need people focused on goals, not those who keep babysitting interns. Those words made Ethan feel dissatisfied. Why was someone like Rachel, who built a culture of support and collaboration, criticized just for putting the development of others first? Ethan realized that Rachel's silent dedication was not properly valued, and this revealed a dark side of the current system, a place where compassion and a supportive spirit were neglected, even considered weaknesses. He understood that if the company continued to ignore such good values, sooner or later, BrightWave would lose its most valuable people, the people who truly made up the soul of the company. After many days immersed in his new role, Ethan sat alone in the quiet room of his house, silently reflecting on the stories he had encountered, the seemingly anonymous people who had left him with deep and lingering emotions. Every night, the images appeared vividly in his mind: Tom, the veteran employee overlooked and forgotten despite dedicating his life to the company; Lily, the talented but quiet girl, passed over simply because she didn't fit the leadership mold set by the company; and Rachel, the experienced engineer who patiently guided the younger generation but was criticized for not pursuing productivity like a machine. Each story brought Ethan a feeling of simmering injustice difficult to name, spreading within the very company he once believed to be humane and progressive. Ethan felt a surge of pain in his heart, a pain of disappointment, realizing that the company he had spent his life building had dark sides he was unaware of. He used to think he was an astute leader, but it turned out he was distant and oblivious to what was really going on at the lowest levels. That night, looking into the space before him, he felt not only disappointment with the organization but also a deep remorse for himself. The bright white lights shone down on the meeting room, creating an atmosphere both solemn and intense. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his eyes glancing over the familiar faces of BrightWave's leaders and senior staff. For the first time, he felt like an observer, looking into the hearts of each person rather than just their job titles. That feeling made him feel a little out of place but also full of meaning. Immediately to his right was Sarah, the head of development, with her neat business attire and strong demeanor. Sarah sat up straight, flipping through the report pages with cold, unblinking eyes. She read the metrics aloud in a decisive manner, her voice clear but lacking warmth. Mr. Ethan, our development team achieved 95% of our goals last month. I believe that if we increase the budget and reduce the time spent on secondary tasks like intern training, we can easily reach 100% next month. Her voice was steady, but her cold eyes as she looked around seemed to assert her position. For Sarah, everything was measured by performance and profit, and Ethan realized that through every word she emphasized. Next to Sarah, Derek, the IT director, nodded in agreement, his stern face showing no emotion, only occasionally frowning when Ethan mentioned issues related to collaboration between teams. Ethan felt the atmosphere thicken, the reports and numbers presented coldly, each achievement like a heavy stone weighing down the air in the room. But he couldn't help but notice the tension in the eyes of a few people. Sitting at the end of the table was Rachel, the longtime engineer he had witnessed helping the interns. She sat quietly, occasionally lowering her head, as if to avoid the judgmental gaze from Sarah and Derek. Seeing that, Ethan cleared his throat, breaking the stifling atmosphere. Sarah, I appreciate your efforts, and those of the development team. However, I would like to ask more about the issue you just mentioned, reducing intern training time. As I understand it, Rachel has been supporting them a lot lately. Does that really affect the goals? Sarah looked directly at Ethan, her eyes flashing with surprise, as if he had just brought up an irrelevant issue. Mr. Ethan, it's true that Rachel is very enthusiastic about supporting the interns, but I think the company needs people who can focus on their main goals. Intern training can be done in their own time. It doesn't have to affect team performance, she said in a cold voice, without hesitation. Ethan turned to Rachel, nodding slightly, encouraging her to speak her mind. Rachel hesitated for a moment, then spoke, her voice trembling slightly but still conveying sincerity. Mr. Ethan, supporting the interns may not be the main task, but I feel it's important. They are the next generation of the company, and if we don't help them from the beginning, how can they confidently contribute to the company in the long run? Some people in the room involuntarily turned to look at Rachel, A few frowned, some looked down at the table, as if not accustomed to her way of thinking. Sarah sighed softly, then turned to Ethan. I understand Rachel's point, but I think we need someone who can lead the team, someone focused on goals instead of just supporting others. Ethan was silent for a moment, clearly sensing the contrast between the different views in the room. He knew that Sarah was just doing what she thought was most effective, but he also saw Rachel's concerns, a fear that humane values would be neglected. He decided to break the rigidity with a calm but assertive tone. Sarah, Ethan said, his voice low, BrightWave is not just a product company. We cannot underestimate those who help build a culture of support, collaboration, and nurture talent. Rachel, I appreciate your dedication. It's those things that create the inner strength of the company. Sarah paused, her eyes softening, as if Ethan's words had opened up a new perspective she had never thought of. The people in the room, some looked at each other. A few nodded in agreement. Ethan paused for a moment, his eyes sweeping across the room before continuing. He clearly felt the silent and focused atmosphere of everyone, as if everyone was waiting for something from him, not just new metrics. Thank you, Sarah, and everyone for sharing, Ethan said, his voice deep and warm. But I want to talk more about a few people I've had the chance to meet over the past week, when I truly immersed myself in the life of the company. He paused, giving everyone a moment to absorb the meaning of his words. A few eyes flashed with surprise, some eyebrows rose slightly. He continued, his voice warm and meaningful. Some of you may not know, but last week I disguised myself as a janitor to better understand the company we're building, to have the opportunity to experience everything from a completely different perspective. The meeting room immediately fell into an atmosphere of surprise. Some leaders were confused, embarrassed, while Sarah stared at Ethan, her eyes full of surprise. During that time, I met Tom, a veteran employee of the company. He has devoted nearly 20 years of his life to BrightWave. Tom is someone who always does his job well, dedicated to the company, but now he seems to be forgotten, treated as if he is no longer important. I remember that day when I overheard the comments that Tom is outdated. I realized that sometimes we get so caught up in the pace of development that we inadvertently lose our appreciation for the people who helped build the foundation we stand on. Everyone listened in silence, the eyes of a few shifting from surprise to contemplation. Sarah seemed embarrassed, not daring to look Ethan in the eye. Ethan continued, I also met Lily, a talented and hardworking IT staff member. But just because she's not outspoken, not the type to present herself in front of a crowd, she's been overlooked for promotions. I heard her own manager say that Lily lacks leadership qualities. Just because she doesn't fit an ideal mold we set, her contributions are disregarded. He looked around the room, his eyes searching for understanding and empathy. Some other employees lowered their heads, seemingly recognizing some similarity to their own stories. And not to mention Rachel, whom you all know. She is not only a good engineer, but also someone who is willing to mentor and help younger people. But instead of being encouraged, she was criticized for wasting time training interns. This really made me think. Ethan paused, took a deep breath, and continued, his voice clear, each word as if wanting to be etched into the minds of everyone in the meeting room. What kind of culture are we creating if we constantly belittle those who truly care for and help others? If we underestimate talent just because it doesn't fit the standard model we've imposed? Sustainable development cannot come from cold numbers. It must come from trust, from connection, and from our true recognition of those who contribute. The meeting room fell silent. Everyone was quiet, as if Ethan's words had touched something deep within them. Sarah slowly lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the truth that Ethan exposed. As for Rachel, who sat quietly at the end of the table, she raised her head slightly, her eyes lit up with hope and a bit of hidden pride. Ethan continued, his voice becoming stronger. I want you to think carefully about people like Tom, Lily, and Rachel. They are the ones who have helped create the BrightWave we are proud of. They are the ones who have helped, mentored, and constantly contributed. And those are the true values that we need to protect. He looked deeply into each person's eyes, as if to make sure his message was understood. I hope, from now on, we will have a different approach. A fairer and more comprehensive way of perceiving and evaluating, so that everyone in this company feels that they have value, that they are an indispensable part of the organization. Only then can BrightWave truly grow and be sustainable. The whole meeting room was immersed in a quiet and emotional atmosphere. The leaders sat in silence, each eye showing deep reflection. Ethan knew that although the road ahead was still difficult, today he had sparked a small light, a positive change in their perception, and he hoped that from this meeting, BrightWave would not just be a big company, but also a warm home for all those who have, are, and will accompany it. Ethan stood up, his eyes shining with faith and determination as he glanced over each face in the room. He took a deep breath and then declared resolutely, "From today, I want all of us to remember the core values on which BrightWave was built: respect, compassion, and the spirit of cooperation. We are not only aiming for numbers and goals, but also for a fair and sustainable culture where everyone is recognized, developed, and feels they are part of something great." He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in, then continued, his voice warmer and more sincere than ever. "We will together build a BrightWave that everyone can be proud of, a place where people like Tom, Lily, and Rachel feel valued and appreciated. This will be a long and difficult journey, but I believe that we, with unity and determination, will do it." Everyone in the room looked up at Ethan, each eye lit up with excitement and hope. Some smiled slightly, some nodded confidently, and a few looked at each other emotionally, as if once again finding the reason why they chose to dedicate themselves to this company. Applause erupted, first only a few scattered claps, and then quickly became a strong consensus, echoing throughout the room. Ethan smiled, his heart filled with joy and relief. He knew that today BrightWave was not just a company, it was a family, a place where everyone could look to the future with firm belief. Beside him, Sarah also nodded slightly, her eyes softening, seeming to understand more about what Ethan wanted to convey. The meeting ended, but the optimistic and warm atmosphere would linger in the hearts of each person, opening a new chapter for BrightWave with faith in a better future.